Egypt's foreign minister emphasizes the urgent action to end Gaza's war at the Oslo Forum. The UK House of Commons welcomes sanctions on 2 Israeli ministers over their incitement against Palestinians. And Iran warns the US bases will be targeted if nuclear talks collapse. You're watching Q News. I'm Hani Saif, and in the news today, Egypt's foreign minister has called for urgent action to end the Gaza war. Speaking at the Oslo Forum in Norway, Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati stressed the international consensus on a two-state solution and condemned the Israeli actions in Gaza. He also warned of the worsening situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Abdulati called for unimpeded humanitarian aid access and reiterated Egypt's role in mediation and post-war reconstruction. The Oslo Forum brings together global leaders and mediators to address conflict resolution efforts worldwide. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since early morning have killed at least 46 Palestinians. Al Qahira News correspondent has reported that 32 of the victims were waiting for aid in central Gaza. Other fatalities were reported after Israeli forces bombed tents sheltering displaced people in Al-Mawasi, west of Khan Yunis, and in areas north of Gaza City. Artillery shelling also continued in southern Khan Yunis, targeting several areas. At least 20 Palestinians were killed and more than 100 injured after Israeli forces opened fire near an aid distribution site in Gaza, according to the Palestinian media. The attack occurred near the Netzarim corridor, a key military route cutting through Gaza. The 6-kilometer corridor, established by Israel during the war, isolates Gaza City and northern areas from the. Despite the danger, Palestinians continue risking their lives to access desperately needed aid amid rising hunger and hardship. The assault marks yet another deadly day in Gaza's deepening humanitarian crisis. Israel's finance minister says humanitarian aid should not reach Gaza and insists military operations must continue. Bezalel Smotrich reiterated his opposition to aid deliveries into Gaza, calling the war extremely difficult. He said the Israeli army seeks to weaken Hamas by controlling Gaza's population. Smotrich also stressed the need to destroy Hamas's military capabilities. Recent violence in Gaza highlights the urgent need for humanitarian aid and protection for civilians amidst the ongoing conflict.
Israeli occupation forces reportedly opened fire on Palestinians gathered near an aid distribution site on the Palestinian side of Rafah in southern Gaza, killing and injuring multiple people, according to Gaza Civil Defense Agency. The site was run by the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which operates independently of the UN to deliver aid. amid Israel's ongoing blockade. Eyewitnesses and medics said Israeli forces fired on the crowd seeking food. The Israeli military claimed it was unaware of injuries caused by its fire and said the incident is under review. This attack is part of a series of incidents where Israeli forces have targeted aid seekers. On March 23, 2024, at least 19 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli attack targeting civilians waiting for aid southeast of Gaza City. Similarly, on March 14, 2024, the Israeli occupation forces opened heavy fire on thousands of civilians gathered near the Kuwait roundabout in southern Gaza City, resulting in more than 80 deaths and 200 injuries. The United Nations has accused Israel of deliberately obstructing aid distribution in Gaza, where 2.1 million people face extreme food insecurity. Restrictions on aid access have led to chaos, including looting by disparate civilians. These attacks underscore the urgent need for a ceasefire and unrestricted humanitarian access to prevent further catastrophe in Gaza.
The World Health Organization warns Gaza's southern healthcare system is near collapse, with Nasser Hospital in Qnews now the only ICU facility in the area after Israeli strikes shut down Al-Amal Hospital. An Israeli attack continues across southern Gaza, including aid distribution points. Nasser Hospital is overwhelmed with patients wounded while seeking food and supplies. The facility is operating beyond capacity, now serving as the region's last critical care center, raising fears of a deepening medical disaster. Far-right Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque, accompanied by senior police officers and settlers under heavy Israeli police protection. Entering via the Moroccan gate, they roamed the mosque compound, with some performing Talmudic rituals. That came as around 100 officers secured the site, barring Palestinians from entry or prayer and seizing IDs of worshippers present. The Israeli National Security Minister's storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound has sparked widespread condemnation and heightened tensions.
Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem, escorted by police and far-right supporters. The move was widely condemned by Arab and Muslim nations who saw it as a blatant violation of the site's religious sanctity and the historical status quo. The timing of the visit, amid escalating violence in Gaza, further inflamed regional tensions. This is not Ben-Gvir's first controversial visit to the holy site. He previously entered the compound in January and July 2023 and April 2025, each time drawing international condemnation. Countries and international organizations, including the UN and EU, have repeatedly warned that such actions threaten the fragile status quo and could provoke wider unrest. Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam and is located within a compound that Jews revere as the Temple Mount. By long-standing agreement, non-Muslims can visit but are not permitted to pray there. Ben-Gvir's visit, which often included rhetoric about asserting Israeli control, are seen as attempts to change that arrangement. Respecting religious sites like Al-Aqsa is essential for regional peace and stability. Undermining their sanctity risks igniting further conflict and deepening divisions.
Australia has imposed sanctions on two far-right Israeli cabinet ministers over what it calls serious human rights violations, according to Foreign Minister Penny Wong.
Australia has applied targeted financial sanctions and travel bans to two senior ministers in the Israeli government, Ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, for their role in serious human rights violations and abuses relating to Israeli settler violence in the West Bank. They are the most extreme proponents of the unlawful and violent settlement enterprise.
The UK House of Commons welcomed the sanctions on 2 Israeli ministers over incitement against Palestinians. British lawmakers expressed frustration over the situation in Gaza and backed sanctions imposed on Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. A joint statement by the foreign ministers of the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Norway and Canada accused the 2 Israeli officials of inciting violence against Palestinians.
Privately and publicly, we were raising it before we came to government, and indeed the last government raised it as an issue.
Western sanctions on the Israeli ministers include travel bans and financial measures, according to a joint statement. The UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy and his counterparts said that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich incited extremist violence and serious human rights abuses. The statement described their action as unacceptable and emphasized the need to hold those responsible to account. The Arab League chief has welcomed Western sanctions on 2 Israeli ministers over calls for violence. Secretary-General Ahmed Abul-Gheit praised the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Norway and Canada for sanctioning Israeli ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. He said the move exposes the criminal behavior of officials involved in war crimes and widespread violations in both Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Israel's foreign minister has slammed Britain's decision to sanction 2 Israeli ministers, calling it outrageous. The government says it will meet next week to respond. Speaking alongside his Zambian counterpart in Jerusalem, Gideon Sa'ar condemned the UK's move as unacceptable. A special Israeli cabinet meeting is planned early next week to decide on a response. French leftist groups have accused their government of sending weapons to Israel since October 2023. A coalition of French left-wing parties and organizations claims the government has been supplying Israel with arms and military equipment. France's Armed Forces Minister Sébastien Lecornu denied the allegation, saying no weapons were sold except for components used in defense systems like the Iron Dome. Israeli opposition parties have jointly submitted a bill to dissolve the Knesset and topple the government. Israeli media report that all opposition factions have agreed to present a dissolution bill for voting today. They also decided to withdraw other legislative proposals to focus solely on bringing down the government amid growing dissatisfaction with its handling of the ongoing war. Israel's finance minister says Hamas should be eliminated within 2 to 3 months, warning against early elections. Speaking in the Knesset, Bezalel Smotrich admitted growing domestic and international pressure to end the war in Gaza. He argued that calling elections now would be irresponsible and said toppling the government mid-war threatens Israel's future. Israeli media say Netanyahu is pressuring Haredi parties not to support the Knesset dissolution bill. Reports indicate the ultra-Orthodox Haredi parties had threatened to vote in favor of dissolving the Knesset if no compromise is reached on a military service law that satisfies their demands. Prime Minister Netanyahu is now lobbying to prevent their support for the opposition's move. And for more analysis, we now move to Rana Al-Assas in our newsroom. Rana.
Thank you so much, Hani. And for more on this, we're joined by Mr. Ahmed Fatouh, the spokesperson of the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Fatah, speaking to us from Ramallah. Welcome to Qnews, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Sir, what is the significance of the United Kingdom and its allies imposing sanctions on Israeli ministers for inciting violence? And is this a shift in Western policy towards Israel, sir?
Thank you for having me. Of course, it's highly welcome and very important step that United Kingdom and Australia, Norway, and other countries has led in sanctioning the two extremist ultra-right ministers, Ben Gvir and Smotrich. It is well needed, and it's long overdue step in their toward the sanctioning and holding Israel accountable for their crimes, these unspeakable crimes that have taken place in Gaza for 20 months. We look forward for even further sanctions, and we have to point out that Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is wanted for the Prime Minister of Israel, who is wanted for the criminal court, also deserves sanctions, and his government deserves sanctions for committing war crime after war crime. We look forward that these decisions gonna be a first step toward a policy of holding Israel accountable, and we look forward and we hope and we call that this accountability take place as soon as possible, because as we are witnessing, Israel is committing magnificent crimes against humanity. It is disregarding all our moral code, all our human rights, and all the international law, disregarding the Palestinian people and treating them like subhuman beings. It's time for the Western world to redefine its relation with Israel and revise its policies, because apparently Israel does not care for any sort of peace, any sort of human rights. They will continue in their obliteration and destruction. I hope that the EU and United States consider increasing the sanctions. Also, it's important to point out that the government also required to recognize Palestine and to take a political step, a comprehensive political steps that would realize the Palestinian independence and push toward the two-state solution.
Perfect, sir. Domestically, sir, Israel's opposition is pushing to dissolve the Knesset. How much is that pressure tied to the war's handling and international fallout like these sanctions at this point, sir?
Well, apparently Israel and his Netanyahu and his ilk from the fascist far right in Israel has made Israel a pariah state with their crimes against humanity. More forces inside Israel, more opposition inside Israel are realizing that their government is presenting a dire threat to the two-state solution, also to peace, and their image in the world. Therefore, some voices, the camp of peace in Israel is now rising its voice against these inhumane acts and trying to topple Netanyahu. I hope they will succeed in their efforts. They are still not very strong in terms to topple the government, but Netanyahu is facing a massive backlash.
Sir, why don't you think they have this enough strength to topple this government at this stage, where the entire world, I think, is now starting to take action, which is too late, but they're at least starting.
Yeah, of course, it's too late. The entire world is taking action, but inside this Israel, I'm afraid that we have a severe far-right pandemic. This is the issue that recent polls inside Israel, I think you have seen Haaretz says more than 70% to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. So unfortunately, I'm not really that there is a majority inside Israel that actually believe in peace. Now, the entire world needs to make pressure. There is a rise in that, and we admit this rise. It's long overdue, as you say. It will be intensified, and we have to, mention the arm embargo, because these guns that are killing our women and children are not coming out, are popping out from thin air. They are coming from Western governments and Western factories. But internal politics of Israel is a little bit more complicated. I really hope that the opposition would topple Netanyahu, the war criminal, and that would be an opportunity for the world to drag him to the international court.
Of course. How do you assess a Finance Minister Smotrich's call to eliminate Hamas within 2 to 3 months? And is that militarily or politically realistic on this stage of the war, sir?
Well, at this stage, after 20 months of witnessing and seeing all the analysis of Israel's actual aims of this war, it's gaslighting what Smotrich is saying. Israel is not after Hamas. Israel is after a colonial ethnic cleansing project. This is well known by now. And they are only using Hamas as a pretext for their crimes against humanity to expand their occupation. And what they are doing in the West Bank, which does not have Hamas, has nothing to do in their claimed goals. Expanding of settlements. 22 settlements now is legalized by the Israeli occupation government to be built in the West Bank. All this assassination and execution of Palestinian people, civilians in West Bank, and expanding their demolition of our houses and demolishing the refugee camps. This has nothing to do with Hamas. It's far away from Hamas.
True, sir. Sir, I want to, of course, continue, sir. Continue. I'm very sorry.
Sorry. This is in a course to colonize the entire Palestinian land, and they want to topple the Palestinian prisons and the Palestinian existence. This need to be, known for everyone by now.
So it's not about us, sir. It's using Hamas is just to do what they want to do on the ground, actually, but it's not all about Hamas. Sir, that was Mr. Ahmed Fattouh, the spokesperson of the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Fatah, joining us from Ramallah. Very thank you, and of course for your valuable, informative, and knowledge and insight, sir. And now we go back to Hani Saif in our studios. Hani.
Thank you, Rana. Now it's time for the latest developments on the talks between the United States and Iran. Iran's defense minister has issued a stark warning, saying that if nuclear negotiations with the United States collapse and conflict erupts, Tehran will target all American bases in the region without hesitation. The warning came after Iran successfully tested a missile equipped with a 2-ton warhead. The minister declared full operational readiness and insisted that any threat would be met with force, adding that the U.S. must leave the region. In a post on X, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has emphasized that U.S. President Donald Trump asserted upon entering the White House that Iran shouldn't possess nuclear weapons, aligning with Iran's doctrine and serving as a key foundation for a mutual agreement. With indirect Iranian-American negotiations resuming on Sunday, there is optimism that a swift agreement ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program is achievable, contingent on oversight by the IAEA and effective sanctions relief. These are all the news that we have for now, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. Egypt's foreign minister emphasizes the urgent action to end Gaza's war at the Oslo Forum. The UK House of Commons welcomes sanctions on 2 Israeli ministers over their incitement against Palestinians. And Iran warns the U.S. bases will be targeted if nuclear talks collapse. This concludes our news bulletin for now, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates coming up here on Q News.